Compare the continental United States in 1941 to the island chain of Japan. On one side, a continent-sized industrial giant with nearly limitless natural resources. On the other, a small archipelago with almost none. Why would a tiny, resource-poor nation deliberately launch an unprovoked attack on an industrial superpower capable of easily crushing it? Faced with the imminent total collapse of their nation, the Japanese military command viewed striking the United States as a desperate strategic necessity. By late 1941, Japan's massive military machine was running on borrowed time. Between 70 and 80% of their entire oil supply originated from the United States. When the U.S. enacted an oil embargo, Japanese industries ground to a halt. Military leaders realized their tanks, ships, and aircraft would be permanently immobilized within months. The only viable alternative source for oil was the Dutch East Indies. That the path to those resources was geographically blocked by the U.S. Pacific Fleet stationed in Hawaii. To secure the fuel required for the empire to survive, Japan's leadership decided they had to neutralize the American fleet standing in their way. In the mid-19th century, European powers were aggressively colonizing and dividing the Asian continent among themselves. In 1853, Commodore Matthew Perry arrived with 4 American warships, demanding that an isolated Japan open its borders for trade or face naval bombardment. Emperor Meiji realized that to avoid becoming a Western colony, Japan had to completely overhaul its society and rapidly militarize. Japan pushed into a period of intense industrialization, quickly becoming a leading global exporter of manufactured goods like cotton textiles. However, the Japanese islands lacked coal, iron, and oil. Without these raw materials, the new industrial economy could not function. Japan's independence was built on a fragile foundation. To keep their factories running, they had to look beyond their own borders for resources. Japan shifted toward imperialism, deciding to colonize neighboring countries to secure captive markets and the raw materials they lacked at home. These efforts were rapid and violent. Japan forced Korea to open its ports and crushed the Chinese military to secure regional dominance. A shocking victory over the Russian Empire in 1905 firmly established Japan as the dominant military power in Asia. Expansion escalated into the 1930s with the invasion and occupation of Manchuria, a move designed to secure further land and natural resources. Every military conquest solved one resource shortage while creating another. A larger empire required a larger military to hold it, which in turn demanded even more oil and steel. As Japan moved into China and French Indochina, the United States shifted from diplomatic protests to economic retaliation. The U.S. began cutting off vital industrial supplies. Scrap iron, copper, and steel exports to Japan were drastically reduced and eventually halted. The ultimate blow came when the U.S. enacted a total oil embargo and pressured the Dutch East Indies to stop selling oil to Japan. While America viewed these sanctions as a nonviolent way to force peace, Japan viewed the resource strangulation as an existential threat that made a violent breakout their only remaining option. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto and the High Command determined that a preemptive strike on the U.S. was necessary to clear the path to Asian oil. To attack the shallow waters of Pearl Harbor, Japan invented modified torpedoes with wooden fins that allowed them to level out immediately after being dropped, preventing them from sinking into the mud. On December 7, 1941, the attack destroyed hundreds of grounded aircraft and resulted in the deaths of over 2,400 Americans. The strike inflicted critical damage on the U.S. Pacific Fleet, sinking or severely damaging several battleships along Battleship Row. However, the operation missed the American aircraft carriers, which were out at sea. This left the United States with its core striking power intact and ready to retaliate. The following day, President Franklin D. Roosevelt requested a formal declaration of war, committing the United States' massive industrial and military power to the global conflict. America's vast industrial capacity, the very thing Japan's leadership feared, ultimately overwhelmed the Japanese military and reversed their territorial gains. The war ended in total catastrophe for Japan, culminating in the deployment of atomic weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan launched the Pearl Harbor attack to secure the resources needed to save its empire.
Instead, that decision led directly to the absolute destruction of the nation they were trying to protect.